Justice has a long memory. For 30 years it lay dormant, buried at the bottom of a dusty case file. Now, on the eve of the end, it's awakened not by a lawyer's plea, but by the distant bark of a dog. They thought they had buried the truth along with the man, but they forgot about the one witness who never learned how to lie. A final wish, an unlikely reunion, and a wall of silence that's about to crumble with the scratch of a paw. The truth always finds its way back. The walls of Ironwood State Penitentiary seem to exhale the chill of a century of sorrow. In the last cell on death row, a place the sun appeared to refuse to enter, sat Walter, a man of 70, whose hands once fine-tuned the delicate gears of timepieces, now trembled with the weight of time and resignation. His face was a map of calm wrinkles, a stark contrast to the crime he was condemned for, a violent robbery that ended in death 3 decades ago. He no longer fought. The appeals had run dry. Hope had trickled away like fine sand. At dawn, the final protocol would begin. But when the prison warden, a man with tired shoulders and a bureaucratic gaze, asked him about a last request, Walter didn't ask for a hearty meal or a phone call. His voice, quiet and a bit rusted from disuse, held a single plea. "I'd like to see Sparky." The guards exchanged glances. There was no record of any family member with that name. The warden furrowed his brow. "Who's Sparky?" Walter looked down at his own hands, almost ashamed. He was my dog. A mutt he had taken in just weeks before his life fell apart. A request so simple, so childlike, it sounded delusional in that environment of steel and concrete. Walter's story would have ended right there, a forgotten footnote if it weren't for Maya. A few miles from the prison, in a silent university library, the young law student was on the verge of giving up on her paper about wrongful convictions. The cases were cold, the documents impersonal. Walter's file was the last in the stack, the oldest and most hopeless. But as she thumbed through the yellowed pages, something caught her eye. It wasn't a flaw in the forensics or a questionable testimony. It was the requests, repeated every 5 years and always denied by the administration. "I request a visit from my dog, Sparky." That stubborn human detail in the midst of so much formality was the piece that didn't fit the image of a killer. Driven by an impulse that went beyond legal logic, Maya decided to follow this single thread. She found Walter's old address, and to her astonishment, an elderly woman still lived in the small house next door. It was Mrs. Evelyn, a keeper of memories, whose face lit up at the sound of Walter's name. "Are you here because of him?" she asked, her voice trembling. And from a corner of the room, a white-furred mutt with a tired gait got up and came to sniff her. "This," Evelyn said, her eyes welling up, "is Sparky." In that moment, the 30-year loyalty of a neighbor and her dog became the first crack in a wall of injustice. To understand that wall of silence, you have to go back in time to the first stone that built it. 30 years earlier, Walter's watch repair shop was a sanctuary of patience. The air smelled of fine oil and polished metal, and the only sound was the synchronized ticking of dozens of mechanical hearts. Walter was more than a merchant. He was a guardian of time, respected for his craft. That peace was shattered the day Richard, a businessman from a wealthy family with grand gestures, stormed into the shop with fury in his eyes. He had come to pick up a gold watch, a family heirloom. With genuine regret, Walter explained that a leak from the adjacent building had flooded his workbench overnight, damaging the piece beyond repair. He offered to cover the cost, but Richard didn't want money. He wanted a victim. "Incompetent!" he shouted for everyone to hear. "You destroy a relic and think money solves it? A man like you would never understand the value of things." Richard humiliated him publicly, promising he would make Walter pay, not for the watch, but for the affront. Walter stood there, still and silent, as his reputation, built over decades of honest work, was demolished in minutes by sheer arrogance. Richard's promise was fulfilled in the most perverse way imaginable. 2 weeks after the humiliation, the city woke up to the news of his death. The businessman was found in his mansion, the victim of what police quickly labeled a robbery gone terribly wrong. But the scene was too clean, the chaos too organized. Richard's family, influential and powerful, wasted no time in pointing a finger. They spoke of the resentful watchmaker, the public argument, the veiled threat. The investigation, under pressure, took the shortest path. The next morning, Walter's small shop was raided by police. In a matter of minutes, they found what they needed. Under a loose floorboard in the workshop, an envelope with the exact amount of cash Richard had claimed the watch was worth. And, in a tool drawer, a heavy file, which would later be confirmed as the murder weapon. The arrest was swift, a silent spectacle. Walter, in his work apron, offered no resistance, only a look of profound, genuine confusion. But no one cared about his denials. The story was too good to be untrue, the humble craftsman, blinded by greed and a desire for revenge. His shop was spray-painted with the word murderer. Neighbors who had greeted him for years now turned their faces away. In court, he was a ghostly figure, a man whose life had been stolen even before the verdict. The rejection was total, and the silence that followed was the beginning of a sentence that would last 30 years. That feeling of being judged before you can even defend yourself, it's suffocating. Have you ever felt that way, like your voice has no value, like the truth is yours, but no one is willing to listen? If you understand that feeling, leave a yes in the comments so I know. In the present, Maya's compassion had morphed into a quiet mission. Convincing Mrs. Evelyn to allow the visit was the easy part. The old woman saw the chance as a miracle. The real obstacle was the system. The prison warden, a pragmatic man, denied the request immediately. "Miss, this is death row, not a petting zoo. Bringing an animal in here is a security risk and an unprecedented breach of protocol," he said, with a coldness that bordered on exhaustion. The refusal, however, lit a new fire in Maya. If she couldn't win through compassion, perhaps she could find leverage in the law. That night, poring over copies of Walter's case file, she stopped looking for a mistake and started looking for a lie. And she found it, a small but significant discrepancy. The arrest report stated that the anonymous tip that led to the discovery of the money at Walter's place came in at 8 a.m., but the entry log for the search team at the watch shop was from 7:30 a.m. How could they have acted on a tip that hadn't been given yet? It was a small flaw, a typo perhaps, or maybe not. It was enough. The name of the detective who signed the search report jumped off the page. A phone call, and a quick search later, Maya found him, retired, living in a small coastal town. His voice on the phone was gravelly, tired of old stories. But when Maya mentioned the time discrepancy, there was a pause. "That case never sat right with me, kid," he confessed. "Too fast. Look for the name of the officer who was with me, a guy named Jonas. He was the one who found the money." With this new piece, Maya returned to the warden. She didn't mention her suspicions, only the need for a final humane gesture for a man whose case file contained troubling inconsistencies. Maybe the warden saw the determination in her eyes, or maybe the word inconsistencies carried weight. He relented. Tomorrow, 1 hour, no exceptions. It was all Maya needed. The next day, the visitation room felt like a stage for the final act of a tragedy. It was a grey cubicle, furnished only with a metal table and 2 chairs. The tension was palpable. Maya entered with Sparky, who walked with the slowness of his many years, but with his tail wagging shyly as if he caught a familiar scent in the sterile air. When Walter was brought in, time seemed to freeze. He didn't say a word. He just knelt with difficulty, and his eyes, for the first time in decades, filled with tears. Sparky let out a low whine, a sound that was a mix of recognition and pain, and dragged himself to his former owner's hand, licking it as if 30 years had been just 30 seconds. Supervising the meeting, leaning against the door, was a guard with a sour face and a weary posture. His name tag read Jonas. The name echoed in Maya's mind. It was him, the man the retired detective had mentioned. Maya watched him, disguising her interest. After a few minutes, Sparky seemed to notice the guard's presence. The dog, who until then had been in a trance of affection, stiffened. His hackles rose, and a low growl, faint but unmistakable, escaped his throat. He tried to back away, hiding behind Walter's leg. "Stupid dog," Jonas muttered, looking away. But Maya saw it. She saw the unease in the guard's eyes and the pure, terrified truth in the dog's. Sparky wasn't just reuniting with his owner. He was recognizing one of the people who had been in his home on that terrible day. The visiting time was running out. Maya knew she couldn't wait. As soon as Jonas led Walter back to his cell, she went straight to the warden's office. With the urgency of someone fighting against the clock, she laid it all out. The time discrepancy, the retired detective's tip, and most importantly, the dog's terrified reaction. "An animal doesn't fake fear," she said, her voice firm. "Sparky remembers that man." The warden, a man of the system, saw for the first time a real crack in the story the state had been telling for 30 years. Jonas was summoned. In the warden's office, under the pressure of questioning and with the weight of the image of that growling dog, the old guard crumbled. He confessed. He told them he was paid by Richard's real killer, a business partner who wanted out of a dirty deal. Walter, the publicly humiliated watchmaker, was the perfect scapegoat. The confession, recorded, sealed the outcome. There were less than 3 hours until the execution. A frantic phone call was made to the governor's office. Back in his cell, Walter was waiting for the end. But the door that opened didn't bring the execution detail. It was the warden, his face transformed. "Walter," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "the execution has been cancelled. New evidence. Your conviction was a mistake." Walter didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stared into nothingness, absorbing the sound of those words, while in his mind the image of his old dog was the only thing that was real. The truth sometimes isn't unearthed with shovels, but with the scent of loyalty. For 30 years, the justice of men failed, trapped in paperwork, procedures, and well-told lies. But the justice of nature, the memory of a dog, doesn't forget the smell of fear or the face of evil. Walter's story reminds us that the most powerful proof isn't always written in a case file. Sometimes it's in an animal's growl, a student's stubbornness, or the dedication of a neighbor who refused to forget. Justice delayed is, without a doubt, a form of injustice. A life was consumed by the shadows of a lie. But its arrival, even at the last possible moment, proves that no wall is high enough to contain the truth, especially when the guardian of that truth has a pure heart and 4 paws. If this story about loyalty and justice moved you in any way, your like shows us we're on the right path. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Seriously, I read them all, and I make a point to warmly reply to everyone who takes a moment to comment. And if you believe in the power of stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. The channel is just starting out, and every new subscription gives me the fuel and the certainty to continue this journey. I'm really counting on your help. Don't go just yet. Choose one of the 2 stories I've left on the screen for you to watch next. I'll see you in the next video.